The man says he is just an inhabitant of planet Earth, a civilized place. He spits blood, and a child calls out to the old man, Seo, saying that her mother asked her to bring him something. The old man thanks her. The child places a small bread roll on the floor and asks him to get better and make more of that soap. With that, the little girl disappears into the blizzard. Once again, he says, I am an inhabitant of planet Earth, someone who came from a civilized world 50 years ago. He doesn't know how, but he ended up in this strange world. He had been on his way to a lecture with his co-workers when they were swept away by a landslide. It seemed obvious that everyone had died, but instead, they woke up in this strange world, standing before a giant fox with 3 tails and a 2-headed snake. There were strange people with the power to fly through the skies, reminding him of the novels he used to read from time to time. And yet, even though he was aware of all this, he never imagined that all his colleagues would go on to live far better lives than the one he led. Creatures known as the sages appeared from the skies and were impressed by his friend's talents. Each of them was taken to different parts of the world and the heavens. Only he and Director Kim were left behind. For some reason, they both held out hope that, since they had also come from another world, something special would eventually happen to them. However, as time passed, they realized there was nothing special about them. All they could do was manual labor to survive. 6 months later, the director said he couldn't go on living that way. Pooling the little money they had earned, he bought a basic martial arts book, the kind sold on any street corner. Strangely, in just 3 months, he mastered the book and became a martial arts master. He began working for the nation and went on to learn more advanced technique. Before long, he became a powerful warrior known throughout the world, while the protagonist was left behind. To this day, he still wonders if there was ever something special in store for him. He always believed so, but time passed and nothing happened. Now, after 50 years, he's just an old man, dying alone from a cold. He did his best to survive. He learned the local language, how to write, and how to earn money. He bought a small plot of land and built his own house using knowledge from Earth. He made things like soap to sell and earn a living. This world was far less civilized, and he knew of concepts that were still new here. But the martial world was competitive. His recipe was quickly stolen, and wealthier individuals invested in large-scale production, pushing him out of the market. Only in novels do you invent soap and become a billionaire. Since then, it hasn't been easy to make even enough money to get by. And now, there he was, waiting for death after being rejected by this world. He wonders what they expected him to do. He tried his best, so what was the right path? Why was he chosen if he wasn't special? And why did he have to keep on living, only to have everything taken from him? At that moment, he no longer even had the strength to keep his eyes open. While thinking that all he ever wanted was a little more power, or perhaps just a few more opportunities, he died. However, we can't end everything here. There he is, waking up, looking at his own hand, wondering why he's alive and why he's wearing the same clothes he had on when he first arrived from Earth. In front of him are all the people who worked with him, nursing headaches and wondering where they are. That's when it hits him. He has come to this world with a power, yes, the power of regression. Right after that, one of the guys, probably Kim, comments that they were on a trip, so how did they end up here? Obviously, this is the very first day they arrived, right after the accident. Strangely, when they hit the ground, he saw a strange light, and then opened his eyes here. The problem is, that was 50 years ago. It's hard for him to clearly remember how things worked back then. Someone is calling for Manager Seo, and while our protagonist is wondering what he should do now that he has regressed, he realizes that, in most regression stories, the person takes advantage of their knowledge of the future. But all he ever learned was how to make soap, and he doesn't even remember much of the past, because he ended up living for too long. The guy calling out shouts for Seo Eun-hyun, telling him to look over and stop ignoring everyone. Our protagonist is just about to apologize for not turning around when the guy suddenly punches him in the face. The girls and the others just stand there, mouths open in confusion. The guy who hit him calls him an idiot, claiming he must have fallen asleep while driving and caused everyone to fall into that hole. Apparently, he has no idea that they actually died, since he says that almost everyone died. Our protagonist had forgotten, After all, it had been a long time since anyone had even called him manager, so he hadn't realized this guy was referring to him. The guy then asks if Manager Seo is trying to lose his job the moment they get back. Our protagonist recognizes him as Section Chief John Myung-hoon, the nephew of a director, a scumbag who only got his position through nepotism and who always made his life miserable. The guy is chewing him out while everyone else is asking him to calm down. Seo starts to get up, remembering that on the day he was driving, he really had been a bit tired, because John had dumped all his own work on him. Not to mention, Seo wasn't even supposed to be the one driving on that trip. The guy is still shouting, and everyone is trying to calm him down, while Seo's memories slowly begin to return. Back then, something similar had happened. He thought he was in the wrong and just kept apologizing, all hunched over. That's how he lived for the next 50 years. Always apologizing, always lowering his head. Even when bandits robbed him, he apologized. When martial artists humiliated him, he apologized. However, after years and years of living like that, he began to realize something. It's necessary to control your behavior around people you can't handle, but every situation is different. He calls out to Chief John and says that he understands he's angry, but now isn't the time to be pointing fingers at each other. John storms over to throw another punch, adding a charming comment about his mother, and it lands squarely on Seo's cheek. You'd think our protagonist would just take it, but hold on. He stares him down, thinking to himself that he'll never kneel before someone he can actually handle. Then, he hits him back, right in the cheek. Everyone stands frozen, mouths agape, as Seo steps forward. He says that in his past life, he was beaten by countless martial artists, an uncountable number of times. He lands another clean blow and remembers how the bandits were far more ruthless, how they beat him just for gathering herbs on the mountain. The same thing happened when he couldn't pay his taxes. And now, here he is, beating the hell out of this guy. In this violent world, he had gained something these people didn't have. He understood exactly how the human mind worked. The moment you land a punch square in the eye, fear multiplies. After a few more hits, only 2 words come out of John's trembling mouth. He utters the famous line, "I'm sorry." Our protagonist might not possess the mythical talents that those sages from the heavens seek, nor the martial prowess necessary to become famous in this world. However, he does have the ability to change his destiny. That fool John is there, holding his head, completely subdued, while the others call out to Seo, asking him to calm down a bit. How could he beat up his coworker like that? Our protagonist immediately plays the normal person card, saying he accidentally lost his temper, and offers a sort of apology. Manager Kim says there's no point in apologizing to them. John might have crossed a line, but Seo went too far by pummeling him like that. Seo knows that of all the people there, the only one who will somewhat stick with him is Director Kim, so he kind of agrees with him. This man is going to become one of the strongest martial artists as soon as he starts learning, so Seo has to support him and stay close. Obviously, this was all just part of his plan for now. He goes over to John and apologizes, saying he really did overreact. John looks like he wants to say something, but one little glare from Seo makes him turn away, frightened. Kim takes a look at the forest and says they have to get out of this place and find a village or something. Seo knows that's the logical thing to do, but it's a shame logic doesn't work in this world. This is the world of immortals, where everyone is trying to secure their own immortality, and the only rule that exists is that the strong devour the weak. Anyone in this world with a sword in hand will fight for fame and honor. The name of this forest is the Path of Ascension. Unfortunately, there is no nation, village, or anything nearby. Seo calls out to Kim and says the sun will be setting soon, so maybe they should make camp in a safe place. Kim agrees, saying Seo is right, but wants to know where their car full of supplies is. If they could find it, they could survive easily. Seo already knows it's a shame, but that car will not be found under any circumstances. The problem is, they won't believe him if he just says that. He tries to convince them it's impossible to find the car, but he has another plan. He says the best idea for now is to split up. One team looks for the car while the other sets up camp. That way they secure both opportunities. Since it's a logical decision, everyone ends up agreeing. Night falls. Obviously, they didn't find the car, and they built a campfire. The blue-eyed girl, whose name he still doesn't know, wants to know where the car is. They were in a landslide, so where did the thing end up? Kim and everyone else comment that nobody has a clue. She's asking the wrong person. Everyone there is lost. The group is eating some kind of chestnuts, which are pretty tasty, and Seo says he found more on the way, so they don't need to worry. The manager praises him, saying that the situation is very difficult, but thanks to him, things aren't getting too complicated. Ever since the company, he knew Seo was a person they could count on. Now he remembers that he was probably very tired since John had dumped all his work on him. The other girl with the yellow eyes says that the manager has indeed always been very diligent. The little devils are all laying on the grass. It's a shame he already knows these wretches are all going to abandon him. In his past life, Seo only found this cave after hours and hours of walking in the dead of night. Now he says that it was by luck that he found this place, while thinking that he has to take advantage of this short moment because this is the last night they'll be able to laugh like this. A short time later, under the moonlight, he trembles as he welcomes the Lord of the Forest, a three-tailed fox. Standing before him, the fox says that the boy has a very strange smell for a human. It has lived for over 1,000 years and has never smelled anything like it. The people waking up in the cave come outside and are all startled by the sight. In his memory, Seo tells everyone to kneel and show respect to the Lord of the Forest. The fox remarks that every time it meets a human, it's reminded why they are idiotic and rude. It would have already torn off everyone's limbs, but one among them knew how to respect the forest, so they would be forgiven. However, the fox adds they are in its territory and must pay a price. One of them must offer an arm to remain there. Seo remembers that in his past life, no one knew what to do when this creature appeared. They panicked and screamed in desperation. The fox then tore off all their limbs, leaving them half dead. At least this time, it seemed to appreciate the way he acted. The creature, however, licking its lips, wants to know who will offer the arm. Seo, having already seen everyone lose their limbs in his past life, thinks this isn't such a big deal. A single arm from one person is a small price. Besides, he knows that others would arrive suddenly and heal everyone. That's how they survived last time. Not to mention, anticipating something like this, he had even prepared an herb to help reduce the pain. With sheer resolve, he says he'll offer his arm. Everyone is startled. The fox doesn't hesitate. It takes a big bite and rips the boy's arm off. Everyone winces at the pain, and Seo immediately goes to retrieve the herb. The fox then says it expected the taste to be different because of the boy's scent, but in reality, he tastes like any other human. In fact, it's even worse. His veins seem impure. Seo, completely wrecked, apologizes that the offering wasn't good enough. But the fox turns and declares that they may remain in its territory for 7 days and that no one will die during that time, thanks to its divine protection in the forest. Then it disappears. The rest of the group calls for Seo, asking if he's okay. He says he is and asks for help to get to the cave. Since he was the first one to encounter the fox, he says he talked with it before they arrived and learned a little about this world. He reveals that they are no longer on Earth, and everyone is scared, saying they never imagined something like this had happened. But considering they saw a three-tailed fox, reality is sinking in for the group. Seo explains, showing his arm. At least they're safe for a week, because of what he did. The others want to know what happens after that week, and he says they'll have to give up something else. Everyone is desperate, but he just says he's exhausted and needs to rest, hoping everyone understands. Night falls, and apparently John said something, because everyone is against him. Our protagonist is listening to the guy asking who's going to give up an arm and a leg in a week. The guy in the Adidas tracksuit says that even so, they can't just give up on Seo like that. He was very useful and was the person who found the place, right? He even gave up his arm. John says they should make the most of his presence and then discard him. He's already lost an arm anyway and won't last long. For now, John is making his little plans, but our protagonist is over there without an arm, farming aura with his hand in his pocket. From what he heard the guys talking about, it seems they want to imprison him to offer up one of his limbs every week. He picks up a big rock, thinking he's not too thrilled about that. However, with the violence he learned over the last 50 years, it would be easy to finish off John even without an arm. The guy is there with his back turned, poking around, while Seo questions whether to kill him or not. He takes a deep breath, drops the rock and says, not for now. Fear must be influencing everyone's judgment at this moment, and if he's too cruel, it will only complicate the future relationships he needs to build with Director Kim. He hears someone telling John to shut up or they'll break his legs. Seo realizes that even though John is full of plans, there are still people on his side. Night falls and another day arrives. Unlike the fox that ate an arm, the two-headed snake that appeared only asked for a little blood. In a past life, this same snake had sucked their blood, even when the poor souls had no limbs left, no feet, no arms. This time, Chief O offers his arm for a taste, and the snake takes a quick sip and leaves. That's because the human's blood, this time, was the worst it had ever tasted. It didn't want any more. Seo knows it didn't like it because that guy's blood is bathed in alcohol and nicotine, on top of the boy's cholesterol. Seo tells John Manghoon to come with him to get some herbs. It's kind of disrespectful to call the guy by his full name, but Seo just asks if he's hungry or not. The guy says yes, so Seo tells him to come on because he's going to show him which herbs are edible. He's already planning to give his arm to the fox next week, too, so if he dies, he needs someone like John to know these things. John is all awkward, but this is exactly Seo's plan, and he says it's good to know that and thanks him for sharing the information. However, Seo knows very well that the fox isn't coming back, and this guy won't even have a chance to make use of this information. Next scene. He's chewing out John, asking how many times he has to tell him not to pick the wrong herb. The guy is all, "I'm sorry," and Seo says it seems like he's trying to kill everyone. He keeps chewing the guy out, taking advantage of the passive aggression from his past life. John tries to explain that he needs a break. He's been digging for these herbs non-stop. However, Seo knows that this guy did everything he could to punish him from the very first day at the company, and with that, he just tells him to get back to work. They have to finish before the sunset. A while later, John manages to find a giant ginseng root. He asks if this thing is really normal, and Seo says, "It seems so." Obviously, the guys have no idea that this is actually a yellow bamboo root. Maybe it's because they're in the forest of Ascension that things are so full of energy. Normally, that thing grows to the size of a little finger, but in a place like this, things are different. It's not very useful for those who depend on spiritual energy, but for those who rely on physical strength, it's perfect. Seeing that the harvest is going well, John gets excited and wants to know how much more they'll find. A while later, looking at the horizon, Seo knows the time is coming. A bright explosion happens in the sky. John falls face first to the ground, and everyone is riding with their hands on their heads, wondering what's going on. Some guys appear in the sky, saying it's a surprise to have found so many talented people. The one in the background in a yellow robe tells Byuko to disappear because they belong to him. The guys are all arguing, while Kim wants to know who they are and what's going on. But the one in the black robe comments that only 3 of them have spiritual roots, and the rest seem like normal mortals. He extends his hand, making a golden ball, and throws an attack at John. The old man appears excited, saying that the boy really did have the power of the golden thunder. The one who looks like a woman with black lipstick, it's unclear if it's a he or a she, says it's their turn now and plays a little tune. The blue-eyed girl starts to writhe in agony, screaming desperately, while the other one celebrates, saying she found a perfect immortal route. The muscular guy puts his hand on Chief O's shoulder and says he has a sacred body and will be taken as a disciple of Azure. The guy is clearly scared, not knowing how to respond while feeling the pressure from the man. The one with the black lipstick says that maybe he'd be better off in the Valley of Ghosts, a perfect place to seek immortality and dominate the heavens. They all seem to be arguing over who gets to keep Chief O, while Kim is confused by everything that's happening. Suddenly, the guy in the golden robe pulls out a small pot and sucks John inside, saying that humans are too indecisive and he will take him to the path of ascension regardless. The muscular man sees that Seo lost his arm to the fox and says that he really is very brave. He might just be a regular mortal, but he really was quite a boy. Seo thanks him, but at this, the guys are already leaving, saying their work there is done, and they should take advantage of the fact that this forest will be safe for 10 years since they passed through. Kim, desperate, tries to say that they need help because they don't even know how to get out of this place, but the guys have already left. Seo knows that in his past life, he shouted and shouted but was ignored like an insect, so it's not even worth it. At least, Just as everyone's bodies were restored in the past life, in this one he got his arm back. Kim, however, wants to know what they are going to do to survive in a forest like this. Strangely, a bunch of stars seems to be heading in a certain direction, and he wonders why. The next day, inside the cave, the girl is suffering, spitting blood. The other one, the one in green clothes, is still unnamed. I've already realized these girls must not be important, because I still don't know their names. She comments that her friend in the pink clothes is not doing well. What do we do? Seo just asks to wait a little longer. Maybe someone will show up to heal her. It would be a huge coincidence. The group finds it a bit strange, but just then, someone enters the cave and says that their suffering is like ants trying to defeat a dragon. Kim asks who he is, and the man introduces himself as the Sea Dragon King, Seo Huiol. He comments about controlling the storm and says he saw it was raining here, and that's why he came to this place. The girl lying on the ground somehow used magic to create this weather. He finds it strange. She looks like a normal woman, so how could she possess so much power? Besides, she wasn't even consciously manipulating the weather, which makes it even more strange. Seo says they're the ones who are confused. They only arrived in this place recently, and powerful people like the Sea Dragon King keep appearing, seemingly to take his companions. Huiol laughs and says that apparently, some of his colleagues had already arrived and seen potential in the group. It's almost ironic that now, conveniently, he has also appeared in front of this woman. He then asks if the mortal understands where he is. This place is known as the Path of Ascension, the perfect passage to the upper world. In a few months, the Gate of Ascension will open here. It's something that happens once every 1,000 years, and because of that, countless creatures and people gather in this place to try to pass through the gate. That's why so many strange people have been appearing here. Seo says he understands, while Kim wants to know why the rest of his colleagues were taken into these sect-like objects. Huiol explains that it's really difficult for a mortal like him to understand. In this world, it's common for people to possess magic that allows them to increase or decrease the size of things. Most likely, the ones who took his friends have their entire sect or group stored inside one of these objects. Their plan is to cross the gate while carrying everyone inside. In the Sea Dragon's castle, more than 8,800 dragons are sleeping. It's unclear whether he means actual dragons or members of the dragon clan. He also mentions that the girl is very peculiar. If she joins the group, she'll have a chance to become something extraordinary. Kim asks him to wait, saying he can't just take the girl like that. But suddenly, Kim falls to his knees, his eyes nearly popping out of his head. Huiol says he will give his blood to her and accept her as part of the group. He says it's the best solution for everyone, and he warns them never to interfere with the intentions of people in this world. The boy's head is about to explode, and our poor protagonist got caught in the crossfire. Huiol leaves. He's being merciful. Most people would have killed him. With a big thunderclap, he flew off on the dragon, stylish as ever. The next day, everyone is kidnapped except for one girl, whose name is still unknown. She laughs maniacally, saying, "What a mess! This world with its dragons, colleagues being taken away, people flying. What is this?" Seo gently pats her, telling her to calm down, but she begs him not to be taken away too. She wouldn't survive alone in the forest. He thinks it's a shame, but their time is up. Suddenly, she begins to writhe in agony, clutching her head and saying something is coming. Kim runs to help, but she says it's too late. Whatever it is has arrived. Out of nowhere, an old man on a mechanical lion appears. He wants to know how there are mortals on this path, and concludes that the place is unstable because of the opening gate, which is probably how they ended up here. He asks who emitted the vast consciousness he felt, believing it was one of the sages from the upper realms descending to earth. For some reason, he thinks it's the girl. The old guy asks the other man to stay, wanting to know who he is, and warns him that she is their colleague. However, the old man just gives him a look, and once again, Director Kim is attacked. Poor guy, every person who shows up seems to beat him up. Thankfully, our protagonist cushioned the blow so Kim wouldn't die, but his ribs were badly injured. The peculiar old man then approaches, takes the girl's face in his hands, and declares that the child will be taken with him. She might not have a strong foundation, but with her talent for consciousness, he can awaken her power. The girl cries out for the two of them, but the old man insists it's best for her to abandon her worldly connections, especially now that he's made his offer. The two of them begin to fly, and it appears he's going to kill them to force her to accept. She, however, says she'll accept if he doesn't kill them. The old man agrees, saying it's good for her to forget all her connections to the world, and she consents. He lets the two of them go, but then suddenly aims in their direction, warning that if he leaves them alive, she will remain forever connected. He opens a portal for them to return to a nearby city. Humble, right? The other guys who came didn't even do that much for the boys. Then again, they didn't have much of a choice. They were just sucked into the old man's ring and could only hear the girl calling for them as they said goodbye. The two wake up in the middle of an abandoned place, hearing people selling scriptures and cloth in a place called Yanga. Seo opens his eyes in an alley, wondering exactly where he is. In his past life, he didn't end up in this place, so he doesn't recognize it. Apparently, the old man told the truth and threw them into a random location. However, for some reason, it feels a little familiar. Shielding his eyes from the sun, he finally recognizes the place where he once lived. The famous capital of Yenghua, the city of Seokyung. So far, our protagonist has no powers at all except for the ability to regress. So it's a contest of the talented against the boy who can turn back time. A short time later, they're still in the alley talking. The old man says he can't take it anymore and is going crazy. Seo comments that he feels the same and wishes he could wake up as if it were all a dream. The old man scratches his hair and says they're screwed, only the two of them are left. Maybe they should be relieved they weren't taken by those monsters. But Seo doesn't agree. He may have gone back to the past, but he remembers that on this path, he was nothing more than an herb collector who got beaten up every day. He says that whatever the future holds, they can't just stand still in this alley forever. At least they have to get out. The city is vast, but Kim doesn't understand anything the locals are saying. It seems like everyone is commenting about them, since they're being stared at, but he has no idea why. Seo explains that people are commenting on their clothes. Everyone around is speaking Chinese, but the two of them are Korean, so Kim is confused. Seo says he learned Chinese when he was younger. The old man, however, is more worried about Seo's torn-up back than the language barrier. In truth, it's not even Chinese they're speaking. The symbols are similar, but the sounds are completely different. In his past life, Seo spent 2 months being yelled at by beggars just to start understanding what people were saying. Now, though, there's no reason to worry. He says they first need new clothes. Kim is unsure how they'll manage with no money and no way to communicate, but Seo, ever resourceful, goes to an herb shop and gives the fat ginseng root to the shopkeeper, who is shocked. Seo immediately lets him know that the yellow bamboo root is over 800 years old, so he'd better pay a good price. The shopkeeper offers 15 silver ingots, a serious sum. Even Seo is surprised. In his past life, he never managed to accumulate so much money. He simply accepts the offer. Soon, they're in a large house that Seo has rented or bought. He tells Mr. Kim he's going to teach him the local language. Everything seems to have worked out well and easily, such is the power of money. The problem is, to get the house, fake identities, and clothes, he spent almost everything and is left with just 1 silver ingot. The director notices Seo's back is still bloody and tells him to take care of it before it gets infected. Kim says he'll stop calling him boy manager and will now call him Seo Eunhyun. A little later, he explains that the reason they got all this money was because of those herbs. The problem is, they're going to run out of money once the herbs are gone. So the first and most important thing now is to find a way to earn money consistently. Mr. Kim already has an idea. They can sell the rest of the herbs, save up some money, and start a business. Seo knows that Kim used to manage a relatively large company, so it's not a bad strategy. It'll allow them to live, but just living isn't enough for Seo anymore. He's gone back in time, and in this life, he's going to dream big. He knows Mr. Kim is a martial arts genius. In his previous life, just by reading some random cheap street manuals, Kim managed to become a master within a few months. A short time later, he acquired more advanced techniques and became one of the greatest martial artists in the world. But what if this time, Kim started with those advanced techniques from the beginning? Maybe he could become the most powerful swordsman this world has ever seen, 30 years ahead of schedule. And, of course, being close to him, Seo could benefit immensely from that. At this thought, he calls for the director and comments that, in this world, he's starting to realize how important martial arts really are. If they start any kind of business and find success, they'll also need to know how to defend themselves. Director Kim says he's heard about martial arts before, but as far as he knows, they're only taught to those who belong to a sect. So how are they going to learn? Seo already notices that the man knows a little about the martial world. He's not completely lost. He explains that in this city, there are 7 famous sections. There's the Demon Slayer sect, the Blinding sect. No way am I going to name all 7, you won't remember them anyway. But it looks like I'm going to have to. The Demon Slayer sect uses sword and blade technique. There's also the Buddhist temple, you know, the one that fights with those Karate Kid style moves. Then there's the House sect, which is full of the smart ones. And the sect of the 7 mysteries. Apparently, 3 of these are demonic sects, and not much is known about them, except that they're proficient in witchcraft and, obviously, do a lot of illegal things. Seo asks which sect Kim likes the most. Kim replies, of course, the Demon Slayer sect. A true master in a place like this has to use a sword and learn blade techniques. Seo is impressed. He didn't even have to convince the guy to follow the exact same path he took in his previous life. Kim, however, is curious. How does Seo already know all this? Seo tells him that while he was negotiating and getting their identities sorted, he overheard a group of guys talking. 3 months later, in front of the sect, a few guys ask what they're doing there. Our dear Seo, standing on the left, says he brought his older brother, who's interested in learning martial arts. The Raken Goku outfit doesn't look very excited about it. Still, he notices from their clothes that they must have a decent amount of money, and they do need the funds. Even so, he apologizes and says that learning martial arts at this age would be almost impossible. But our dear Seo insists, asking to at least meet someone from the higher ranks, already slipping the guy a coin. A little while later, they're already inside the sect. Someone asks if they really just want to learn for self-defense. Our boy presents a feast of silver ingots and says yes, that's all they want. The moment the old man sees the money, he says it's fine. They can join as external disciples. However, they should know there's no special treatment for those who enter through donations. Also, they'd only be willing to accept one of the 2. Kim is about to complain, but Seo jumps in and accepts the offer, saying it's perfect for them. The man waves them off, saying, okay then. Just come find him later and join the rest of the disciples. Kim turns to Seo and asks if he's really okay with only him learning martial art. He says he would have picked a different group if he'd known it would be this expensive. Seo tells him not to worry. He was never very good at sports anyway. For now, he'll handle the business side of things while Kim goes and learns a bit of these so-called martial arts. The old man thanks him but adds that he's not sure Kim will actually be able to learn much. Seo just smiles and tells him to trust himself, and to try before judging. 7 months later, there's a competition in the sect. The man on the throne wants to know where Kim came from. Kim has crushed all the disciples who have been in the sect for years. Mastering a martial art means understanding its true meaning and aligning your body with it. Someone with limited knowledge, at best, becomes a third-rate warrior. And to advance beyond that point, you need more and more knowledge. The others attack him, saying he's an outsider and will never defeat them. Obviously, gaining more knowledge means you've invested more time and effort. However, some people are talented enough to laugh in the face of all this knowledge business. They have the ability to advance through multiple stages at once. The Demon Slayer sect is famous for such members, but for the first time, an outsider has defeated all the great disciples in just 7 months. Director Kim became a first-rate warrior, mastering all the techniques of the sect. The elder bites his lip. He doesn't understand how it's possible for someone to evolve so quickly. To force something like that, they would have needed to gather countless martial artists to support him. Not to mention, this guy is an outsider who has never had any contact with martial arts. So, how did this happen? It was as if the very traditions of the sect had bowed before this man. And then they gave the order to capture him. Seo had already imagined that this could cause problems. An outsider dominating the sect in just 7 months, throwing everything into chaos. Because of this, the others are accusing him of being a spy. But even imprisoned, Director Kim is still practicing. What Seo doesn't understand is why he's imprisoned too. He knows nothing about martial arts, yet now he's in there with the other guy. Our boy asks if the director isn't worried. After all, a lot of people suspect him of being a spy. Normally, in stories like this, they'd destroy his martial core, cut off an arm, or do something to stop him from ever fighting again. The director, however, replies that he already knows all that. But for some reason, he feels that continuing to practice is the only way to break through the next barrier. Deep down, he already knew that once he passed this one, he would advance to the next stage. Seo understands just how incredible that is. Becoming a first-class warrior is already impressive, but going beyond that? That's something only the true masters of the sect can achieve. At that level, there are at most 1,000 people in the entire world with comparable strength. And beyond that, there's only the peak, a level where you're basically untouchable. At that moment, Seo was certain. This guy wouldn't just reach the top 30 years ahead of schedule, but 40 years faster. 7 days later, there's Manager Kim, with little flowers floating around him as he absorbs energy, something Seo already recognizes as the sign that only appears in martial artists nearing the peak. At this, Kim stands up and announces that he has crossed the barrier. He declares that he's no longer afraid of the sect leader. Our boy praises him, saying his talent exceeds all expectations. The old guy, Kim, admits he's impressed with himself too. He never imagined he had this kind of talent. Maybe it's because, as a child, he read countless martial arts stories. Right at that moment, some men rush in, announcing that the time has come. They've received orders from the sect leader to destroy Kim's energy core. They're now convinced he's a damned member of the demonic sect. Kim gives them a look, and our boy, trying to calm everyone down, says he already confessed. No one here is a spy. But one of the men tells him to shut up and punches him in the face, warning that he overheard them speaking in a coded language and is sure they're not honest people. At that, Kim has already drawn his sword, and in an instant, the man's hand is cut. The slash was so precise that it didn't sever the hand, just disarmed him. The bald man warns that he's already made it clear. This is his first sect. Then, the Rock Goku charges in with his sword, but within seconds, each of them receives the same small tap on the hand, and they all drop their weapons. Panic breaks out. Everyone starts running down the corridors, shouting that, strangely enough, Kim seems to be at the peak of martial arts. Kim turns to our boy and says he's going to visit other sects to train, and asks what he plans to do. Our boy, not being a fool, says he's going to follow him. They could go, for example, to the unorthodox dragon sect. The old man says he'll meet him there, and in the next scene, he's already at the top of the mountain. Kim's sword is already bathed in blood. He asks why it took Seo so long. Seo just laughs, saying, "Yeah, the director is a little faster than me." Noticing the state of the sword, Seo understands immediately. This guy was never a violent person. But this world has already changed him. It would be a dream to one day return to the peaceful life on Earth. If he could choose to go back, that's where he'd go. He's tired of the violence in this world. But none of that matters now. He's here, and he'll do whatever it takes to survive. After being betrayed by the first sect, they invaded the dragon's house and took over everything. 2 years later, they entered the Yanhua region and continued defeating numerous sects. In the 3rd year, all the emblems of every sect had been cut down by him. Before long, in that region, he was named the strongest martial artist under the heavens, and he used that fame to unite the sects and form an alliance. 7 years later, we're really moving along, huh? Seo and the director Kim had become as close as brothers, despite the age difference between them. They even managed to develop a specific martial art tailored just for our boy. Mr. Kim hands him a book and says the name of the technique is Mountain Cutter. He created it with Seo's unique talents in mind and is confident he can reach the peak. Seo seems impressed. The technique is truly beyond anything he's ever seen. The only problem is, of course, the obvious one. He has absolutely no talent. He's learning from the most powerful martial artist under the heavens, using a technique created specifically for him and him alone. And even so, after a whole year of practice, he barely manages to become a third-rate warrior. At this, he says maybe it's just not meant to be. His talent lies in medicine, and maybe that's the path he's meant to follow. After all, each person has their own strength. And then, on the first day after a decade had passed, he witnesses something legendary, the level he had only ever heard about in myths. The 5 energies of the world converging within a single person. Suddenly, the old man starts convulsing. What's happening? His hair grows long and turns jet black. Seo calls out to him, and then, out of nowhere, the man becomes strikingly handsome, with long hair and a muscular build. This is the so-called skeletal reconstruction, a transformation that creates an entirely new body. Our boy says that the guy, looks younger than him now. Kim responds that he really does feel full of life, like he could do anything. Seo congratulates him, saying the world is going to be terrified of this skeletal reconstruction. At that, Kim stands up and says he'll soon have to pass on leadership of the martial alliance to someone else. Seo wants to know who he's considering. Kim says there are talented people out there, but none who truly understand the essence of martial arts. Seo casually comments that he's the only one extraordinary enough to know what that really is. If Kim's expecting to find another genius like himself, it's going to be difficult. Kim, however, just looks out the window and says that even when he tries to lower his expectations, there's still no one who's worthy. And just like that, we've jumped forward another 15 years. It's been 35 years since our boy began his journey on the path of ascension, and now he's already a 65-year-old man. He's wondering what Kim is up to. A year after his skeletal reconstruction, Kim passed on the position of leader to someone else and disappeared. Seo had hoped they could retire together, but instead, he had to stay behind to handle the strategic affairs of the alliance. Kim once said he wanted to travel the world more freely. Maybe that's why he didn't attend Seo's retirement ceremony. Now, Seo walks through the garden, thinking the place is far too quiet. He bought this beautiful mansion with the money he received after retiring. The only downside, it's too big, and he's all alone in it. Then, he notices someone in the bushes. When he takes a closer look, it's Kim. Seo still isn't used to seeing him with long hair. He asks where he's been and why he's only showing up now. But Kim simply collapses onto the grass and calls out Seo's name. Then he tells him, with a tired voice, that he truly believed he was blessed in martial arts. Our boy says that of course he was. If he's not a genius, who would be? His friend replies that yes, in this world of common mortals, he really was not ordinary. The protagonist laughs. Of course, he wasn't ordinary. However, Kim then says that he fought against a true practitioner, one of those from 35 years ago, like that guy who flew and took their friend. Seo knows that these guys don't reveal themselves easily. They are like shadows that control the entire world from the darkest. And as the martial alliance they created gained more and more power, these guys started wanting to influence them. No one could stop these guys because opposing them was like opposing the nation itself. And that's why any rule given by them was obeyed. That's why Kim left this place. He wanted to fight against these guys as an individual and not as a master, especially since that could affect the alliance. Kim then says that they were extremely difficult to find, but he managed to locate one. Most ignored him, saying he wasn't worthy of a fight because he was immortal. They all disappeared, used illusions, and none of them won a fight. However, 5 years ago, he finally got a duel. Seo asked if he won, and the guy said he did. Our protagonist praised him for not being the leader in doing this. Otherwise, they would have paid the price. Kim then says he put his whole life on the line in the fight against this guy, and all he managed to do was inflict a small cut on the tip of his finger. The truth is, the guy had made a bet that if he got even the slightest cut, he would theoretically win. So that's how he was considered the winner. Steelwright then says this guy must have been one of the top 10 strongest or something like that. However, unfortunately, that wasn't the case. He was actually at the stage of one of the weakest. Compared to mortal martial artists, this guy was basically someone who had just entered the second stage. Extremely basic. Seo says that's impossible. He already knew from his past life that these guys were ridiculously powerful creatures. However, he's sure that Kim is someone who has reached the pinnacle of humanity. He could deliver numerous cuts while seeming to float and was untouchable. This guy in front of him was a genius. So how did he only manage to cut the tip of a random cultivator's finger? At this, Kim tells him that he has lived his whole life like a frog in a well. They don't stand a chance against these guys, who are basically walking natural disasters. However, he has something to say. Even so, today he cut off one of their hands. Our excited boy asked if he managed to win, and he said no. The guy put a talisman on his hand, regenerated, and that was it. The problem is that now Kim realizes he has reached the limit of martial arts, and today he's here to say goodbye to our boy. That's because when the guy saw his willpower in training, he said he would accept him into the sect. He would no longer be a martial artist but would instead begin the path of immortality. Seo says that's impossible. To become a cultivator means to abandon mortality. However, something like that can only be done if the person possesses a spiritual root. Kim then explains that his skeletal transformation basically means he has reached the same level of talent that a cultivator is born with. Someone as brilliant as him needed to train his whole life just to reach the minimum level that these cultivators possess. He makes a cut in the void and says he's leaving. The crazy guy is literally entering another planet, saying he's going to leave one last gift for our boy. Before he can respond, he's left with a scroll and the guy has disappeared. The manuscript is a record of how to transcend and achieve cultivation through martial arts. Seo, however, wanted to know where his friend was going without him. And with that, time passed. Once again, there he is coughing, saying that this world is cruel. It's been 50 years since he arrived in this world. Yet, there he is again, dying from a random cold, just like in his past life. Destiny seemed like something humans could not escape no matter how hard they tried. In the end, the only things that changed were the house and the clothes, but he died on the exact same day. At this, he is sure he lived life to the fullest. He didn't want to have any regrets like in his past life. So he kept himself as busy as possible, studied as much as possible, practiced as much as possible, and never even bothered with marriage or normal things. Because of this, he managed to unite all the martial sects in the region. He achieved fame, wealth, and everything the mortal world had to offer. So why, at this moment, did he have a feeling of emptiness? Could it be that if he and Kim had tried even harder, they would have reached the heavens? Unfortunately, his body will never find that answer. All he can feel is a deep sense of powerlessness. Truly, it was another life of disappointment. This is the end of the video. If you guys want to see the next part, then don't forget to subscribe and like the video. See you next time on the Manhwa Recap channel.